Hi, my name is Fabian Williams, and we are here at the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference here in Prague. And I'm fortunate to have with me here Jeremy Thake. And I have for him today a series of questions just to ask him his feedback, how things are at the conference, and a little bit about what he's doing. So Jeremy, could you introduce yourself, let people know their country of residence, area of focus, and something about you that nobody knows? Let's start off with something a little bit fun.
Sure. I'm Jeremy Thake. I work at Microsoft. I'm a principal program manager in the Microsoft Graph engineering team. I am country of residence is Redmond in Washington, but I come via being born in England, living in Australia for 10 years, and a stint in New York. So my accent, no one can guess where I'm from, basically.
Yeah.
Like chameleon eyes.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's almost everybody today, isn't it, right?
It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive right in. So I know this is not your first time here at the conference because I've seen you here before. But how are you finding this conference so far, especially with the fact that there's more of an emphasis on Office 365 and Azure in addition to SharePoint from what it started out with?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started coming to these conferences, it was purely the SharePoint, European SharePoint conference. And obviously over time, the organizers have had to evolve this topic to make sure it caters for the audience that is, maybe focused on SharePoint Server back in the day, and then evolved into SharePoint Online, which then evolved into Office 365, and again now has stepped into Microsoft 365. And then you really can't do things without Azure these days, or a cloud provider. And so I think it does make sense to have this much content that covers these things so that the attendees can essentially learn across the board what they're doing, whether they're a developer, which is where I focus, or an IT pro, or a business user, or an end user even.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. In fact, that's a great lead into the second question because, as you mentioned here, there's certainly, differentiation in terms of people, in terms of what they do, IT pro, business users, developers, such as myself as well. And the fact that this has evolved from SharePoint to Office 365 to Azure, the all-encompassing Azure. How are you finding the sessions in terms of the diversity of what's being offered and the speakers in terms of what they're putting out there?
Yeah, I think diversity at Microsoft is a big focus area for us, and D&I, diversity and inclusion.
Right.
And I think this conference has done a fairly good job of making sure we get good representation across the speakers in all the different tracks. I personally won't be happy until I see a 50-50 split of male to female ratio in the speaker circuit, and it's a journey I think the industry's on. There are some great female speakers here this week. I'm sharing the stage with Laura Kokarinen from Finland tomorrow morning, actually.
Excellent.
And there's some others that I've actually sat in them, and they're I think it's just great that we focus on having that representation to try and make these kind of conferences more approachable for people, and maybe the speakers that might not necessarily put their hand up and ask to speak feel like they can actually volunteer themselves, or that they're approachable and can be asked to come speak at these things. And
absolutely.
I actually had a good chat about this with Scott Hanselman, who did a session last night.
Yeah, the keynote.
And he was basically saying that he will look at the conference to see what the representation is like between male, female ratio, and the diversity. And if the ratio isn't there, he will actually turn down a session. And it's something in the future I'm actually going to take on based on that to try and make this more, prevalent and make it so that the people who are organizing these conferences are more thoughtful about that balance of.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more because, people grow by the diversity of opinions that are there, and people's opinions are shaped by their experiences. And so we're all technologists at heart, but we all bring something different to the table based on our experiences. So, more the merrier is what I say.
And it gives different diverse sets of opinions. Like my team at Microsoft, it's actually more female than male in the PM side for us. And it's a norm for me. It doesn't feel dissimilar. But then you come to these events, and unfortunately, the ratio is not there yet. And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done to try and make that not an issue anymore, and encourage more females into this industry and feeling comfortable to come and speak. And
absolutely. And the one thing I could say about this conference is that when you look at the leadership here as well, it's certainly reflective of that, but not quite yet in terms of the sessions.
Yeah.
All right. So what sessions have you delivered so far, and what have you yet to deliver? You mentioned that you have one coming up tomorrow as well.
Yeah. So as a Microsoft Graph person, obviously I'm doing a lot of Microsoft Graph sessions, and so I did a What's New session yesterday. Where we focused on essentially what we've announced in the last 6 months. We actually did show off some cool new things that we hadn't even shown off at Ignite a few weeks ago.
Right.
Feels like a millennium ago already now.
Yep.
We showed the new Presence API in Teams. So
fantastic.
we've been asked about this for a long, long time. You can change your status from available to away to do not disturb. And essentially with the presence API now, you can get that for a REST call.
Right.
But I also showed it via our new PowerShell modules we have in preview. So even in PowerShell, you can call everything that's on the Microsoft Graph, including that presence API.
Right.
And so as an IT pro or even as a developer,
Right.
there's lots of cool things you can do in PowerShell from a DevOps perspective in automating your builds and making decisions that are happening in the tenant to kind of logic fork the build code.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess the next question I would have for you is, as it relates to your focus here, which is graph, certainly, what would you say is a top thing that people should be paying attention to right now, and why?
Good question. Well, the graph, as we've been very clear for the last 4 years, is essentially the strategic direction for Microsoft when it comes to Microsoft 365 is the API layer for all of our products and services.
Exactly.
And so when you're looking to develop against Exchange or SharePoint, you should really be looking at the Microsoft Graph API to do that. We do have legacy APIs that we've had historically because we had an on-premises product, Exchange server, SharePoint server, and those APIs are available for both Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. But our kind of a mega ask is that you start with the graph.
Right.
And yes, we do have some gaps still in the SharePoint Online APIs in the graph that are available in those legacy APIs. But the best thing to do is get on the graph because essentially that's our future. Whenever we put anything new like Teams APIs or To-Do or Planner, they were born in the graph. They don't have
There's no legacy
API because the strategy was build in the graph, don't build your own thing.
Exactly.
And so that's just one thing you have to just get on board. Get started at graph.microsoft.com.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's the way you exited that question is actually a good tee up to the next one. So, besides this conference, which has great content, great speakers, as we spoke about before, and you mentioned going to graph.com, where would you say, let's say somebody's brand new, net new, coming into this, or coming in from a different type of discipline, where's the best place for them to go and find content, find examples, the best way for them to ramp without with the least difficulty?
Yeah. So we just at Ignite launched a new revamped set of training modules. So if you go to graph.microsoft.com, there's a hero banner that rotates through, and the first one is Graph Explorer, which is the way you can basically use an API playground to explore those APIs. And then the second one is actually the Microsoft learning path.
Right.
And if you click on that, we have modules for Microsoft Graph. We have it for the SharePoint developer story, the Teams developer story, the Office admin story. And once you've done those modules, you can actually take a certification to be certified as a Microsoft 365 developer.
Okay.
And so those modules are great. I actually just did one on the plane on the way here around throttling. So understanding the value of really respecting the retry after headers that come through with the API calls.
So that 425 call if you see
the 429, so don't go too hard, back off if you're going crazy. And so the module walks you through learning and leveraging our SDK, which does a lot of that retry handling
for you. Take the burden off
so the tutorial, the modules are really good at doing that. So definitely go to Microsoft Learn, and there's a lot of great Azure content available on Microsoft Learn there too.
Excellent. That's great feedback. Hopefully everyone will take advantage of that. So the last question. You and I've been here for quite a few conferences, but there are some people here that are new. This is their first time. What advice would you tell people who are coming here for the first time? And again, going back to the theme of this is not just SharePoint anymore. There's O365 and there's Azure. What's some of the things that you'd tell them to pay attention to?
I think my best guidance here would be for any conference you go to as an attendee, and I still do that. I do go to conferences and just kind of hide and not nominate myself to be a speaker, just to kind of consume it in that way, is take advantage of the fact that the speakers are here in person. You can not attend things like Ignite and Build and download the on-demand sessions and see them. But if you don't take advantage of the fact that we are here as speakers and go ask those questions, I think you're really missing out on the biggest part of value of this conference. And we're all available. I wander around. I'm on Twitter at @Thake. If you want to catch up with me, just let me know and I'll come meet you in the hallways. And no question is a stupid question. I learn so much from understanding how someone approaches a technology and how they got to a particular problem, because it helps me, because I own the developer experience on the graph, and it's all about making sure we make it as easy as possible. But to do that, we have to understand the different paths people get to a problem, and to make sure that it's very easy to discover those things. And so for me, selfishly, I love the questions because it helps me, but I want to help individuals that are here kind of overcome
Absolutely.
the obstacles they're having.
Sure. That's all great feedback. And on behalf of the European SharePoint Conference, Office 365 Azure, I'd like to thank Jeremy Thake for taking time with us today and providing some of the benefit of his insights.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you. Cheers.